My name is Captain Alexandra Lex Monroe, and if you had told me 10 years ago that I would one day take down one of the most decorated generals in the United States Army, I would have laughed and told you to lay off the whiskey because back then I believed in things like honor, loyalty, and the chain of command. Things my father taught me before he died wearing the same uniform I eventually grew into. Things my drill instructors hammered into my bones until every heartbeat sounded like yes, sir, and no, ma'am. Things I clung to when I deployed at 19 with nothing but my father's dog tags pressed between my fingers. Back then, I thought the military was the purest place in the world, a place where integrity mattered and where people risked their lives not for money or power, but because they believed in something bigger than themselves. Something like service, something like country, something like protecting the innocent, and for a while longer. Then I'd like to admit I held on to that belief with a kind of fierce, naive devotion that makes you blind to the cracks beneath your feet. But trust me, nothing will strip your illusions faster than losing your soldiers to a betrayal orchestrated by the man who was supposed to protect them. Nothing destroys your faith faster than realizing you were following a man who saw your unit not as human beings, but as disposable chess pieces in a game he was rigging from the beginning. It happened on my 4th deployment, the one that carved deep scars down the center of my life, the one that forced me to become someone I never asked to be. I had earned command of Echo Team 9, a tight-knit squad of 11 soldiers, the kind of group that feels like family because you eat together, bleed together, break down together, and in the darkest nights, hold each other together. We'd survived things that should have killed us: explosives, ambushes, the kind of heat that melts your soul, the kind of cold that freezes it again, and somehow we always pulled through. Partly because we trusted each other with our lives, and partly because I trusted our commanding officer. General Victor Dane, a war hero with a jaw, cut from stone and a row of medals so heavy you'd think his shoulders would crack from carrying them. A man I once admired so much I would have walked into hell if he ordered it. And I did once, on the night that changed everything. The mission was supposed to be simple: recon a small cluster of buildings in a so-called safe zone, confirm the presence of an informant we'd been tracking for months, extract him quietly, and return before sunrise. Easy, routine. Nothing Echo Team 9 hadn't handled a dozen times before. But the moment we crossed into the valley, the hairs on the back of my neck rose like static. The air felt too still, too staged, too silent, and even though every instinct screamed trap, I pushed us forward because Dane insisted we continue, insisted that intel was solid, insisted that timing was critical, and insisted that hesitation would cost us the informant and the lives he could save. So we pushed forward. And in the space of one breath, everything exploded. Literally, an IED detonated under Corporal Jenna Hayes, blowing her 15 feet into the air before the shock wave ripped through the rest of us, shattering bone, bursting eardrums, and lighting the valley with fire. We scrambled for cover, firing blindly, trying to locate the enemy, but they were everywhere, firing from rooftops, from windows, from behind shattered walls, and within minutes, half my unit was down, bleeding, screaming, dying. I radioed for backup with hands slick from trying to hold Sergeant Torres' insides where they belonged. But there was nothing, no reinforcements, no air support, no cavalry, just static crackling through my headset, like a cruel joke. And I remember thinking, this wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't part of the plan, but it was. Dane made sure of it. We fought like animals, dragging our wounded behind burnt-out trucks and collapsed buildings, firing until barrels burned our hands, praying for a miracle that never came. And when silence finally fell, the smoke was so heavy I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. The smell of burned flesh filled the air, and the bodies of my soldiers, my family, scattered across the dirt. I carried Jenna's body myself, even though her legs were gone and her chest barely resembled the person she used to be. Because I couldn't leave her there. Not after everything she gave. Not after everything we were forced to give. Back at base, I demanded answers. How did the enemy know we were coming? Why didn't backup arrive? Why did Dane insist we push forward despite the risks? But the only answer I got was a cold, infuriating dismissal from Dane himself, who told me war was unpredictable, that casualties were inevitable, that I needed to control my emotions, that I was not equipped to lead if a few deaths rattled me. A few deaths, 6 soldiers, 6 good people. Jenna, Torres, Malik, Bryce, Henderson, Lewis, not numbers, not casualties. People with families waiting at home. People I promised to protect. People I failed because I trusted the wrong man. When I refused to let it go, when I pushed for an inquiry, when I filed reports, when I demanded an investigation, Dane turned the system against me so fast it made my head spin. Suddenly, I was labeled unstable, aggressive, insubordinate, a threat to morale. My access was restricted, my credibility destroyed, my reputation shredded. And within weeks, I was discharged under mental instability with a note to seek counseling. They took everything from my rank, my purpose, my identity, while Dane got a promotion and a glossy spread in a defense magazine calling him the architect of modern strategy. And that was the moment the soldier I was died and someone else took her place. I spent months trying to rebuild a life, working private security jobs, drinking too much, trying not to think about my unit, but grief turned into rage. And rage turned into purpose the day I discovered something that made my blood boil hot, enough to cauterize every wound. Dane didn't just get us killed, he sold us out. He leaked our mission coordinates to a private defense contractor in exchange for a multi-million-dollar kickback tied to increased military funding after the ambush. My soldiers didn't die in battle. They were sacrificed for profit. That was the moment I stopped wanting justice and started planning revenge. But revenge not the petty kind, not the emotional kind, clean revenge. Strategic revenge, the kind that destroys a man from the inside, outtakes time, planning, allies, and information. And I knew exactly who I needed. Maya Torres, Sergeant. Torres' younger sister, a cybersecurity analyst who had always been smarter than every man in the room but too quiet to brag about it. When I told her the truth about her brother, she didn't cry, didn't scream. She simply said, "Tell me what you need." Together, we built a plan, one that started with me assuming a new identity, Lena Shaw, former intelligence contractor, then infiltrating Helios Defense, the same private corporation Dane now worked for as head of strategic risk assessment, which I later learned was fancy corporate language for weaponizing corruption without getting caught. I got hired Isley Helios. Loved Veteran Sands soon. I had access to Dane's schedule, his files, his communications, and the digital skeletons he kept buried in encrypted servers. All thanks to Maya's expertise and our shared determination to destroy him. And the deeper we dug, the worse it became. Dane wasn't just corrupt, he was monstrous. He orchestrated weapons tests in rural villages, bribed foreign officials, manipulated intelligence reports, and signed contracts that directly led to civilian casualties, all while the world applauded him as a hero. For 6 months, I pretended to be his loyal analyst, taking his notes, fetching his coffee, smiling at the man whose orders destroyed my life. While every night I copied his files, documented his crimes, and collected enough evidence to send him to prison for 3 lifetimes. But he was protected not just by Helios, but by politicians. Generals, rich men with dark secrets, so exposing him required something bigger than paper trails. We needed undeniable proof, something the world couldn't ignore, something so damning no amount of power could bury it. And so we set the trap. Helios hosted an annual gala celebrating their commitment to global peace, a joke so cruel it barely felt re-land. I positioned myself near Dane during the event. Wearing a hidden microphone, Maya patched into the gala's entire audio-visual system. When Dane stepped out to a side hallway, I followed him, letting my voice drip with familiarity until he turned and recognized me not as Alina Shaw, but as Lex Monroe, the captain he had destroyed. The shock on his face was everything I had waited for. Rage made him sloppy. Arrogance made him talk. And within minutes, he confessed everything: how he leaked our coordinates, how he manipulated combat outcomes for profit, how soldiers were assets and expendable and useful only when dead. All of it captured on the mic and broadcast live through the gala screens and live stream feeds. People screamed, cameras rolled, the world saw. By morning, Dane was a national scandal. By afternoon, the FBI raided Helios. By evening, Dane tried to flee the country. He didn't make it. And when I watched him on the news, wrists cuffed, eyes wild with the realization that his world was over, I felt something shift inside me, not joy, not triumph, something heavier, something quieter, something like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 4 years. But revenge wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Because after destroying the man who killed my soldiers, I needed to honor them. Maya and I founded the ECHO Initiative, a nonprofit exposing military corruption and supporting veterans silenced by the system. And every year I visit the graves of ECHO Team 9, leaving their dog tags recovered from the valley where they died on their headstones. I don't cry anymore. I don't break. I tell them the truth. We won. You can rest now. And perhaps the world will never fully understand what it costs to lose your faith, your family, your purpose, and then rebuild it from ashes. But I do. Because in the end, revenge didn't destroy rebuilt me into someone stronger, sharper, unstoppable. And if I've learned anything, it's this: when you betray a soldier, you don't just make an enemy. You make a force. And force, especially those forged in fire, never fall quietly.